is an argument to justify something you believe. So if I ask you, why are iPhones better than Android phones? I'm asking you to provide me with an apology. Today we're going to spend some time talking about something that's convicted me personally, and I hope it will be interesting for you as well. I was reading this book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. And I know, you can't love God and money, but I just think personal finance and investing and all that is super interesting. As a business major, it's like my thing. So I was reading this book. It's really good so far, but I came across this quote that I thought was really interesting. I wanted to read it. When it comes to weight loss, 99.9% of us need to know only two things: eat less and exercise more. Only elite athletes need to do more. But instead of accepting these simple truths and acting on them, we discuss trans fats, obscure supplements, and Whole30 versus paleo. He makes the point that we would rather debate and talk about the minutia of how to get fit, as opposed to just doing the simple work to actually get there. And for this book, since it's a personal finance book about getting rich, really just like becoming more financially independent and responsible, because it's for finances, he relates that to personal finance as well, right? So instead of doing the simple things like alleviating your credit card debt and getting advantageous bank accounts, things like that he outlines in the book, instead of just doing the simple things to help us get ahead, we instead want to talk about the hottest stocks that are out and the best way to like budget cut and like pinch pennies, don't buy lattes, that kind of stuff. The fun poppy headlines, right? And so as I was reading that, I was like, it's so true, right? In my own health journey, in my own fitness journey, in my own financial journey, it's a whole lot easier to listen to the Joe Rogan podcast and just like nod your head to what's being said instead of actually putting your, what's the phrase? Your hands to the grindstone, actually putting your hands to work and getting things done, making small steps. That's what's really challenging, right? So I think that can be said for the spiritual life as well. So this brings us to what a friend of mine used to tell me all the time, and I like to call it the knowledge-action gap. And he was telling me this when I used to live in Salt Lake City, specifically in just kind of a conviction of like, how are you doing at following Jesus? And so what he would say is, if your knowledge is here and your action is here, what do you call this in between? And then with all the fire of a fire and brimstone preacher, he would say, disobedience. But he's right? So like if you know you should be doing up to this amount of stuff, your knowledge is up here, but your action is only down here. This stuff in between, the stuff that you're not actually acting on, is just knowledge that's not being put to any work at all. If your parents ask you to do a task, you know they want you to do that task, but you don't do it. That's disobedience. If you didn't know they wanted you to do that task in the first place, they'd have no grounds to get mad at you because you didn't disobey them. They didn't tell you. You didn't have that knowledge of what you should be doing. James 4:17 tells us, essentially, if we know something good that we should do and we don't do it, it's sin for us. And a fun story around that, I went to Baylor and I worked on campus. So the place where I worked had a kitchen off to the side that the employees could use, and above the sink, which for college students would often be a messy place, they had posted that verse above the sink as a way of, I guess, convicting us to do our dishes and get stuff done. It worked. The area was always clean, and I think it was because of the quote. But yeah, if we know the good that we should do, but we don't do it, for us it is sin. It's not meant to be like a heavy-handed rebuke or anything like that, the way I'm saying it. My friend in Salt Lake City probably meant it as a little bit of rebuke. But for us, it's not a rebuke, but rather an invitation of like, hey, don't be puffed up with knowledge. Don't just consume a lot of content on YouTube or on TikTok, or even if it's good content, you could consume it. But if you don't do anything with it, you just become, knowledge puffs up, right? And so the call is, how do we close that knowledge-action gap? In the case of the book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, that I was reading, he proceeds to tell you a bunch of actionable steps and kind of breaks it down week by week of like, week 1, do this. Week 2, do this. And just gives you small steps, ways you can start practically moving forward in bite-sized chunks easy to digest, easy to do. That way you might not get overwhelmed, right? He's not throwing a bunch of theory at you. He's giving you a practical step and telling you why it works. But how do we relate that to the spiritual life as well? In our case, I can see two sorts of people. One, someone who is new to the faith or maybe exploring spirituality. The practical advice is go to church, start to pray, and maybe read the Bible. Go to a church, actually explore belonging, go consistently. Don't just go and sit and listen, but actually involve yourself, get to know the people, shake hands with the person next to you. It's like trying to go, if you're an alcoholic, maybe going to an AA meeting for years and never actually participating. It's not going to change anything in your life. You're not probably going to get out of it what it's meant to provide for you because you're not engaging. If you just sat there in the back and listened to everyone else but never actually joined or participated, that's not what it's meant for. And it's the same with church. That's not really what it's meant for. So actually go to church and explore becoming part of the community. And then the second part of that, praying, reading the Bible. Praying is just talking to God. Reading the Bible, even in small chunks, is learning about the story of God, the scriptures that God gave us to learn about Him. So just start taking those small steps. Go to church, read the Bible, pray. Those are ways where you can really practically start to advance forward. And maybe in this case, you actually need some knowledge before you can start taking those actions. You're going to be working your way up that way. The other type of person that we might be talking to is someone more like me who's been around the church scene for a while. And in this world of tons of content being thrown at us, really good teaching available online, and hopefully at our home church, there could be a tendency for us to just consume, get really puffed up with knowledge, and not actually do anything. And the result of that is our faith running cold, our faith becoming cold and dead, because we're not actually doing the things that we've been called to do, that we're learning about doing. For this type of person, I would encourage you, and I'm encouraging myself even, to return to your first love. Think about the last time that you had a deep spiritual experience, the last time that you felt like you were walking with God faithfully, and do what you did back then. Take up those same rhythms, even if they feel old. Hopefully they would reinvigorate your first love, reinvigorate your love for Jesus. And for all of us, no matter where you are, whether you're brand new to the faith or you've been following Jesus for 60 years, in this modern age, I want to encourage all of us to not just consume things without practically applying them. So if you're listening to a podcast, if it's about money, if it's about relationships, if it's about the food you eat, exercising, or spirituality, I want to encourage us all. Think about what you're listening to. Don't just consume it. There's the stereotype of people coming home from work after working on a screen all day. You come home from work, you put something on the big screen, and then while that's going on, you look at your little screen and scroll. So just screen overload, content overload, it's just all noise. How can we back off of that? Maybe it's reducing the amount of noise, the amount of podcasts, the amount of Netflix that we consume. But then even if you don't cut it out entirely, being really intentional with what you consume. After you listen to a podcast, think about what you heard. Ask yourself, is there anything I can do to apply what I've learned? Is there anything I need to change maybe in my life in order to align myself more with what I believe or grow in this area that I was listening to? We don't just want to consume for the sake of consuming. If we did that with food, that makes us get bigger and bigger and not healthier and healthier, right? You have to have something coming in and energy going out as well. Same thing with spiritual knowledge coming in, spiritual action going out. It's just the way we grow, and we grow closer to God, look more like God, and actually exercise our faith. So, next time you're listening to a podcast, or even after you're listening to this video right here, consider the knowledge action gap. Think about, has my knowledge become too high? Do I need to close that gap somehow? How can I do that? These are some practical questions you could ask. Practical questions I'm asking myself now. So until next time, I'm Stephen, and this has been My Apologies.